I'm going to read you a letter I just wrote to the United Nations. Dear members of the United Nations, I am writing to you today to report the United States of America for violations and crimes against humanity, and particularly the following people: Samuel Alito, Clarence Thomas, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. In the Declaration of Independence, signed on July 4, 1776, it states, and I quote, "All men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles, and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. To me, this means that we have the right to abolish our government, yet they have made it impossible to do so due to being persecuted on acts of treason. Therefore, we are considered slaves to our government, which violates the Universal Declaration of Human Rights." I will quote these sections as well for you. "Whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and the equal rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Whereas disregard and contempt for human rights have resulted in barbarous acts which have outraged the conscience of mankind, and the advent of a world in which human beings shall enjoy freedom of speech and belief, and freedom from fear and want, has been proclaimed as the highest aspiration of the common people. Barbarous acts is essentially taking away our rights to have safe and private medical care, which was protected by Roe v. Wade and has recently been overturned. Women having access to safe abortions is not only a fundamental human right, but something that no woman should ever have to fear persecution for. And whilst the majority of the American people do not support the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court decided to do so against the wishes and the will of the American people. Therefore, they are admitting to having their own agenda that does not support our best interests. Whereas member states have pledged themselves to achieve, in cooperation with the United Nations, the promotion of universal respect and observance of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Healthy and safe abortion are fundamental freedoms, because no woman should ever have to have a coat hanger shoved up her vagina because she got raped by a family member. And though that may seem harsh, that is the current reality that we are facing at this time. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. No one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery and slave trade shall be prohibited in all their forms. Slavery is defined as a condition compared to that of a slave in respect of exhausting labor or restricted freedom. We face charges of treason should we try to overthrow our current, very extremist, corrupt government, so we are forced to keep our mouths shut and work to pay for a government that obviously does not care about our basic human rights and our well-being. No one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. And yet in several states throughout the United States, women are being faced with the possibility of having to be arrested for a miscarriage or an ectopic pregnancy. I'll continue in part 2. Okay, here's part 2. I'm going to go back a little bit. No one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. And yet in several states throughout the United States, women are being faced with the possibility of having to be arrested for a miscarriage or an ectopic pregnancy. And that is not only inhumane and cruel, as I am sure that some of the women in your office building have suffered a miscarriage, but I can also tell you that they would be arrested for one of the most horrible moments in their lives. I should also mention here that contrary to the religious zealots in our offices and country, not all women want to be mothers. In fact, that is the exact opposite of what they would want, because they know that they cannot handle the arduous tasks of being a mother. And yet we are being forced to have children because our basic fundamental rights are being taken away by a religious extremist. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence, nor to attacks upon his honor and reputation. Privacy does not mean doctors as well. What about doctor-client confidentiality? Or does that not apply to the religious extremists that are running our country? Men and women of full age without any limitation due to race, nationality, or religion have the right to marry and found a family. They are entitled to equal rights as to marriage, during marriage, and its dissolution. What about the FLDS? What about the states that have less than 18 years old marriage laws? Does 16 years old seem like a good age to get married, or even 12? That is not full age. 18 technically isn't either. Not when documentation shows that you are not fully developed mentally or physically until around the age of 25 years. And not when the American Academy of Pediatrics just had to release a statement warning about the risks of children having children because their bodies are not capable of birthing a child. No one may be compelled to belong to an association, yet our country is being ruled by morons and religious extremists that want to have control and access to our bodies. Does this seem right to you? Because I can tell you that to me it sure does not. We are supposed to have freedoms and rights, and that means freedom of religion and the separation of church and state. But our children are being taught to pray in school, yet they cannot be protected from violent shooters. I can tell you that a prayer to whatever God you might believe in is not going to protect you from a bullet. Everyone has the right of equal access to public service in his country. Public service, such as Planned Parenthood, that's a public service, right? But how are the doctors and nurses supposed to take care of ectopic pregnancies and/or miscarriages? What if it was your 9-year-old daughter who was raped by her uncle? What then? Motherhood and childhood are entitled to special care and assistance. All children, whether born in or out of wedlock, shall enjoy the same special protection. Special care and assistance should mean that if a pregnancy is not viable, then it should be able to be terminated safely and legally. Special care and assistance should mean that if a pregnancy is not viable, then it should be able to be terminated safely and legally, due to the fact that the mother's life might be in danger. Or do our lives not matter anymore? According to your own website listed, Article 7 crimes against humanity include, but are not limited to, imprisonment or other severe deprivation of physical liberty in violation of fundamental rules or of international law, torture, rape, sexual slavery, enforced prostitution, forced pregnancy, racial, national, ethnic, cultural, religious, gender as defined in paragraph 3, or other grounds. Okay, here's part 3. Article 7 crimes against humanity include, but are not limited to, imprisonment or other severe deprivation of physical liberty in violation of fundamental rules of international law, torture, rape, sexual slavery, enforced prostitution, forced pregnancy, racial, national, ethnic, cultural, religious, gender as defined in paragraph 3, or other grounds that are universally recognized as impermissible under international law in connection with any act referred to in this paragraph or any crime within the jurisdiction of the court. And other inhumane acts of similar character, intentionally causing great suffering or serious injury to body or to mental or physical health. Also listed: imprisonment, torture, grave forms of sexual violence, and persecution. Sexual slavery and forced pregnancy due to the rights of the women across the United States being taken away. And one might argue that it's up to the states, and that there are still states where it is legal. However, not every woman can afford to travel, sometimes several hundred miles, to get a safe abortion. And again, I stress the fact that any inhumane acts of a similar character causing great suffering or serious injury to body or to mental or physical health. What if a woman is pregnant and she has a child who has a heartbeat but would never survive outside the womb? Is she supposed to be arrested and sent to jail for having an abortion that saved her life and bury her unborn child? Some women are not mentally or physically capable of having and raising children. It is both physically and mentally exhausting at times, and there is little to no support for moms, especially where I live. I can go on and on and on, but please, from the bottom of my heart, save us from our own country. We are going to die, we are going to be prosecuted, and we are going to be subject to religious persecution against our wishes if the people in office continue down the road that they are going down. Yet we are unable to do anything for some, and some might say, oh, go vote, but our system is so corrupt that only certain families run this country, rigging votes and securing offices while the rest of us are starving to death. This is serious, and we are desperate for help. If I could afford passports for my entire family, I would, and we would flee the country to somewhere safe, but we are barely surviving at this point. We live paycheck to paycheck, and barely at that. We are scared, we are angry, and we are fed up. But how are we supposed to go against the richest people in the country? How are we supposed to overthrow our government when we risk being arrested and persecuted for treason? I beg with you, I plead with you, on behalf of myself, my daughters, and all the women of America, please save us before it is too late. We are living in tyranny, and we are begging for help. Sincerely, a terrified American woman.